Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here with us. A couple areas I want to talk about with you is first, a 1977 bill, the Community Reinvestment Act. To start with, then I want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity if we have time for it. But as you know, this bill was implemented in 1977, and I, as many others, believe it's time to revisit and revise this bill. And last month, I wrote a letter with Mr. Tipton and Mr. Loudermilk to the three banking agencies and the Treasury Department about modernizing the implementation of the CRA. And we received back from the Treasury Department, which recently released its recommendations for CRA reform, and the OCC will be doing the same. And the FDIC chairman, Mr. Grunberg, wrote us back and said he agrees that we need to revisit this. And the three areas that I think that we've been focusing on, I think we need to pay attention to is first, the taking account of the recent developments in fintech. Two is being transparent with banks about which loans receive CRA credit. And the third is giving banks timely CRA exam results. And so my first question is simple. Do you agree that there's a need to revisit the implementation, particularly in these areas?
Very much so. I mean, as you've noted, it's a law from 1977, and the world is very different today than it was in 1977, and achieving the same objectives will probably require different measures now than it did then.
And I'm often reminded when I go back and I watch movies from 1977 how much has changed, and it's not just the hairstyles, but the economy and technology has changed, and we have been extremely slow in keeping up with technology and the regulations for that. And so I appreciate your answer. Kind of follow up on that, do you think the CRA can be modernized without detracting from its core purpose?
Not only without detracting from its core purpose, I think that for it to achieve its core purpose in the modern world, I think it can better achieve it if we sort of take a fresh look at it.
Well, I appreciate it, and I agree with you on that. So I look forward to working with you as we do this. Kind of shift over a little bit on cybersecurity. I spent 20 years in the IT business. This is an area that's very important to me. And I know during a speech to the Financial Services Roundtable in February, you stated that you support the private sector's efforts to harmonize cybersecurity efforts across financial services industry. And I agree with that. But I also think there's a need for federal regulators to harmonize the many overlapping and sometimes conflicting cybersecurity standards that are applied to private sector companies, especially a lot of banks, will have multiple cybersecurity requirements, or financial institutions, I should say, that are differing from the different regulating agencies. In fact, I had one tell me one time, well, if I'm in compliance with regulator A, I'm out of compliance with regulator B in certain instances. What's the Federal Reserve doing to coordinate these cybersecurity supervisory activities with the other regulatory agencies?
So there are some standing processes, kind of interagency processes that are intended to help coordinate that, that are focused on the IT infrastructure exams and the infrastructure of the financial system generally. But as I've indicated, I do think that we need to, in those processes and within the Federal Reserve, we really need to kind of rejuvenate the way we're thinking about it and focus on kind of real resiliency and what we can do to support that as opposed to pure compliance.
So do you think there's more that we can do to coordinate between the various agencies? Like you say, when you have conflicting requirements, it actually harms cybersecurity than actually strengthen it. So I think
absolutely
the same thing that you were saying about the CRA, I think we can apply to cybersecurity. Last question. In your testimony, you said that you're focusing on mitigating cybersecurity risks to financial institutions. Can you just hit on a few of the things that you're doing in that arena?
Right now, the principal effort is in these interagency discussions to think about, where are the real risks in the system. So it's kind of behind the scenes to figure out exactly what we ought to be doing, and then we work on how to affect what we ought to be doing. They're difficult questions, and we are still working on them, but a very high priority.
All right. Well, thank you. I see my time's expired, and I yield back.